What do you tell your kids about drugs? About the drugs you may have used, perhaps without absolutely ruining your life? About drugs you never used but that scare you to death? About drugs that you never used but don't know much about? Well, these are issues that Marsha Rosenbaum thinks and writes and talks about all the time. Dr. Rosenbaum is a medical sociologist and director of the Drug Policy Alliance West in San Francisco. She's devoted virtually her entire professional career since receiving her PhD in 1979 to substance abuse issues. She's the author of several books and pamphlets and scholarly articles and numerous op-ed pieces, which she dealing with drugs, drug addiction, issues relating to women, drug policy, and education. What to tell your children and your grandchildren. I think you'll find she has really good sense, and I know you'll benefit from listening to her. Dr. Marsha Rosenbaum.
Thank you for staying. Hope you'll hang in for this last couple of hours. This morning, Mr. Hutchinson talked about reduces in drug use as evidence that we're winning the war on drugs. Well, teenage drug use has increased steadily over the past decade, just as our government accelerated its Just Say No prevention efforts. And during that decade, I have to tell you, I became very interested in prevention and drug education because that was the decade that both of my children, who are 5.5 years apart, became teenagers. So this became very personal for me. Today, 54% of teenagers admit to using an illegal drug, and 80% of them admit to using alcohol before they graduate from high school. Clearly, the majority are not saying no. And as the parent currently of a teenager, I believe we need a fallback strategy that puts safety first. Mr. Hutchinson also talked about the value of drug education. Let's see and hear what real teenagers, ages 14 to 17, on both coasts of this country and from every socioeconomic status, say about drug education.
I didn't have anyone to ask questions to, because if I were to go to anyone at my school, they would just tell me that drugs were bad and wouldn't actually answer the question.
I don't want my dad to come in and talk to me, or some dare officer to come and talk to me about drugs and what I should do and what I shouldn't do. I want to be able to go to him and just ask him straight out, what will happen to me if I smoke a joint?
You hear the gunshots outside at night, that's normal. You see the drug users strung out on the floor, that's normal. You walk by them as you go to school. It's normal to you. And then somebody says drugs are bad, don't do drugs. You know what I mean? It's like, I know that.
When I was in 5th grade, we had our first DARE program. We had a police officer from the township come in and talk to our class. We had probably like a 1 hour, 2 hour class once a week for, I don't know, a period of like 2 or 3 months, and we'd have a booklet, and he'd come in and talk about things, and we'd write problems in the booklet, like fill in the blanks and circling and matching, and then he let us ask questions. We could write questions on a piece of paper, and then at the end, it was all really cool. Like everyone was, like the detective, I can't remember his name, but he was kind of like a big brother kind of dad kind of figure. Everyone really liked him, and they wanted to impress him.
I just remember thinking I would never use drugs. It never even occurred to me because, I mean, the police officer was saying, don't do it, and that's what I kind of took away from it.
Well, I mean, I remember going to some of the classes and we would just joke about how, you know, those drugs in them cases that they're showing, you know, we'd want to take them and sell them or use them ourselves. You know, we made fun like that because that's what it was. It was funny sometimes how, you know, you get this nice clean-cut cop coming in here with weed and crack and cocaine and showing us that, you know, but he's probably never used it himself either. You know, he's a cop now.
I remember the first story that I heard was about this basketball player that was going to play for the Celtics, and he used cocaine and died that night for the first, you know, he used it for the first time and died. And that was the first, I mean, that was what was stuck in my head since 4th grade from that police officer coming, and that was the only thing. I don't remember anything else.
You'd watch videos and like stories of people and like where they are now, like some of them like living on like the streets or like living in homes because they were so taken over by these drugs and it got addicted. Definitely addiction was a big point to their consequences issue, and I would say we were scared a little.
It scared me a lot. I mean, I went home and my parents kind of gave me their version of drug education, and they told me that they had at one point smoked marijuana. And I just started to cry, and I couldn't stop crying because I thought my parents were going to wind up like all those people on the tape, and I didn't know what to do.
In 8th grade, we had it again, and it kind of became a little more, it was a lot different just because we were older, and some kids had experiences with like smoking cigarettes or, you know, smoking pot, and it was a lot different just because some kids didn't really trust the cops, and some kids didn't want to say anything because they didn't want to get in trouble, and it was just like, like it's so corny, like no one wants to do it.
I think between 8th and 9th grade, your drug education takes on at least for me, it took on a different meaning, almost, is you're entering high school, so everything before high school suddenly becomes something that's uncool, like it's not the big time, like high school is big time, kind of. So once you enter that, you're with seniors in high school, you go to school with seniors in high school, and they're a lot more experienced than you are. So you kind of grow up quickly, and you kind of forget, I think, what you learned in your drug education in 5th and 6th grade because it's uncool.
Freshman year, you know, maybe the captains of the soccer team that you made, you know, are smoking pot before practice, and then they're coming to practice and they're still better than you, and then and then everything that you've been taught has all of a sudden changed, and it loses all its credibility because you've almost proved it wrong, you know. The problem with peer pressure in drug education is they define peer pressure as the bully walking up in the hallway and handing you a joint and saying, smoke this now or else I'm going to hang you upside down from, you know, the swing sets. And that doesn't happen at all, you know? I mean, it might, but I mean, cases like that are so rare.
I figured out why I did it, and it was because my friends were doing it. So I wouldn't be the only idiot. They didn't force me. Just all around. So I was like, you can give me some, you know, just so they'd be like, yo, Priscilla did this, and, you know, just to be known, to have a good reputation. It would be a bad reputation, but to me it would be good. You know, people would know, you know, she can come chill with us, we could have fun. I'll be part of it in the crowd, and that's why I did that.
When I was little, you know, I saw the Just Say No on the candy box or on a supermarket, wherever.
it's a catchy phrase, but it doesn't really mean anything. It doesn't make me think about drugs. It doesn't, make me reflect, what does this mean? And I feel like somebody's putting words into my mouth, and with doing that, they're taking away my decision. And it's also kind of a joke a little bit. We're just like, oh yeah, just say no. And we joke about peer pressure, like, ooh, it's peer pressure. And I don't know, I don't really feel like it's that effective.
If there's some kid at a party and he's shy, he doesn't know what to do, and someone passes him a beer, if he says no, he is going to be a loser to other people, and that's what teens care about. They care about what other people think, and it's just a really unrealistic way of teaching kids how to deal with drugs. I think it shouldn't be just say no, but think about it or something like that, like use your brain.
You can see videos about people who've gotten shot or people who are strung out or who've gotten AIDS over drugs, and that's cool and all, and that might touch some kids, but that's not people we know.
They have scare tactics. They have skits that they put in front. They have puppets. They have stories. They have magazines and books and textbooks and everything, and it just doesn't seem like it's getting across very much. I think the thing that kids listen to most are their friends, older brothers, older sisters, parents, and I think that's where the real education comes from.
What I do know about drugs is what I learned out in the street and from seeing it with my own with my own eyes and learning from personal experience.
I've seen people who've had drug problems. I think that's one of the greatest lessons, people that and everyone can't have that lesson, and maybe some people have too much of that lesson.
I have a younger sister, personally that's used crack, and she's been incarcerated for about 1.5 years now, and I've seen that. I know that, and she's not just crack, other drugs, but because of that, I've stayed away from that, She was an example to me. That's who I don't want to be like.
Kids will make their own decisions. It's just kids need to have the knowledge instead of just being scared.
I want to get every side of the information that I'm being given and then be allowed to make my own decision.
You could have history teachers talking about the history of drugs, and then you could have the science teachers talking about like what drugs physically do to your body. I don't think health teachers, who are basically teaching gym classes, talking to kids about drugs is really effective.
No one's going to go up and start to talk with their teacher about their drug use, because that's just, you don't do that, because that's going to start getting in the way of your schoolwork and stuff like that. So I think having someone come in who's not affiliated with the school makes it just so much easier to talk to.
You need somebody to get in your face and tell you, look, I was there. I know what it is like to be strung out on heroin at 3 o'clock in the morning with a needle stuck out my arm. I know exactly what that is like. And I'm telling you right now that it's the worst feeling in the world. You don't want to go where I've been.
You need to know which drugs are really powerful and really scary and which are less, because there's something, it's about the being lied to thing. If somebody says to you, smoking marijuana, you don't get addicted, it's okay. It's not as extreme as doing speed. Yeah, if you don't know that, and you have the choice to do either one, and you don't know anything about either one, you might pick speed, your first time, and I've never done drugs, and yeah, you should know.
I think they need to make a distinction between drug use and abuse, that people can use drugs and still lead a healthy, productive life. Your parents can come home and drink a glass of wine with their dinner. They're not alcoholics. They could also maybe, smoke a joint on the weekends, and they're not some stoned out pothead that, goes to Grateful Dead concerts or something. And they never really talked about that.
I think honesty is sort of the core of drug education, and the only thing that's going to help people not use drugs. When you're not being bombarded with propaganda and for or against drug use, then it's more likely that kids are going to make more informed decisions.
I think kids are gonna do what they wanna do, and that's it. I mean, it's hard to catch a teenager's attention and actually have them listen to you. I mean, it's hard.
Hey yo, just say no to drugs, well how easy is that? When you got thugs on the corner shooting slugs at your back. I shouldn't have to say no to drugs, cause there shouldn't be none. And I shouldn't have to walk out my house being afraid of a gun. Just say no to drugs will explain to us why. Putting slogans on TV ain't gonna help us survive. And we ain't nothing but statistics when the situation gets critic. Put yourself in my shoes and experience how we live it. Let's talk.
I believe that we need to begin to think critically and, more important, creatively about drug education, because it's hard to say this, but it's true. It may not be possible to deliver a generation of drug-free kids. Why do I say this? First, as many people have talked about already, America is not drug-free. A recent JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association article reported that 81% of Americans use a medication regularly, and 51% of Americans use a prescription drug regularly. We even have ads on TV now. Have you seen them? They are prime time network ads that start this way. Are you anxious? Do you feel that you're worried all the time? And then you have a commercial for what? Prozac or Paxil or Zoloft, an antidepressant. This is on network TV. And we also know, incidentally, that in the last decade, what we've seen with antidepressants, feel-good drugs, is a 3-fold increase in their use. And the advertising just started. We regularly, as Americans, imbibe with alcohol. We use it to celebrate, and we use it to relax. We line up for our Java fix outside Starbucks. This is something not lost on the kids. And if you've ever seen anyone try and kick a coffee habit lately, as I have tried to do and fell off the wagon pretty immediately, it's not a pretty picture. We also have seen an increase among drug use among young people. The boys in my era who used to end up sitting outside the room because they couldn't sit still, that doesn't happen anymore. Now they're on Ritalin. Another observation that the kids can't avoid. So teenagers know that America is not drug-free. Second, teenage is a time of exploration, experimentation, risk-taking, and rebellion. So our risk and danger messages that we've been delivering present more of a challenge than a deterrent when it comes to drug use. I think boys are a little more prone to taking risks. I think that because my son had 3 broken arms before he was 10, but girls as well. And I'd like to just read you a quote quickly from, this is a book called Generation Risk, and it's about cigarette smoking. But I think it's indicative of how teenagers look at risk and warning dangers, and particularly when you're warning them about something that's going to happen in the way future. This is a girl who says, when you're a teenager, everybody is like, oh, don't smoke, be smart. You're just like, what happens if I smoke? I'm not going to die that second. Pretty much everyone dies. If you develop cancer, by that time you're already 65 and gross looking anyway. So that's what we're up against. Third, after 20 years of scare tactics, exaggeration, and just plain misinformation, young people simply don't believe very much about what adults tell them about drugs. We have dug ourselves into a huge and deep credibility hole. So when the kids see the ads on TV or when there's a program that comes in the school, they start out with a very, very cynical attitude. So it's a huge credibility hole that we have to dig ourselves out of. So the question is, what should we do? I think we need to think in terms of drug education for life. Not a standalone class that comes in for the purpose of telling kids, don't do that. I think we need drug education for life because all of us deal with drugs for the rest of our lives. We need to know, for example, how much is enough? Dose level. What combines with what? Badly, in particular. We all need drug education. Let's use high school as a way to prepare us for real life. I also agree with one of the boys in the video who talked about incorporating the subject of drugs into real, solid science classes. Why not have a module about drugs in physiology or chemistry or biology and psychology and social studies? There you present the subject in an honest, scientific way with no particular agenda, and I don't think there's any better deterrent for people than when they find out what drugs really, really do to their bodies. So I think incorporating really doing drug education. People have already talked about after-school programs. I'd like to just add that I think if we want to get serious about reducing drug abuse among the people, young people and older people, we need to think about education. We need to think about our schools and how to engage our kids more meaningfully. Often you find that with teenagers, they're bored with school. Their brains are not being tweaked. So I think we need to think about school, and of course after-school programs need to be seriously, seriously beefed up. I also think that what we need, it's something that we do in my city of San Francisco with sex education, is that for an hour a week, or 2 hours a week, excuse me, in the same room is an expert, an adult expert, who comes in and is there as a resource for the kids. That person can discuss drugs with them, help the kids themselves, they have a laptop in there, to research a variety of drugs and questions that the young person may have. The other great thing about the drop-in program, Anonymous, at the same time in school every week, is that if a child thinks they might have a problem or might be moving in a direction that's unhealthy, then they have someone to talk to short of enlisting themselves in formal drug treatment. Going to drug treatment is a huge commitment. People don't want to do it. So if you have at least some kind of arena where young people can talk to an expert they trust, at least their problems can be addressed, and if they do need a referral, they can get it in that safe setting. I think that we should use the successes of sexuality education over the last decade as our model. I think that's where we are in reality-based abstinence plus drug education today, and I think that's a useful way to go. As parents, I think we should let our teenagers know how we feel about drugs, but more important, we need to let them know how we feel about them. And so I'd like to conclude by reading a letter that I wrote to my own son about drugs when he entered high school. Dear Johnny, this fall you will be entering high school, and like most American teenagers, you'll have to navigate drugs. As most parents, I would prefer that you not use drugs. However, I realize that despite my wishes, you might experiment. I will not use scare tactics to deter you. Instead, having spent the last 25 years researching drug use, abuse, and policy, I will tell you a little bit about what I have learned, hoping this will lead you to make wise choices. My only concern is your health and safety. When people talk about drugs, they are generally referring to illegal substances such as marijuana, cocaine, methamphetamine, psychedelic drugs such as LSD, ecstasy, mushrooms, and heroin. These are not the only drugs that make you high. Alcohol, cigarettes, and many other substances, like glue, cause intoxication of some sort. The fact that one drug or another is illegal does not mean one is better or worse for you. All of them temporarily change the way you perceive things and the way you think. Some people will tell you that drugs feel good, and that's why they use them. But drugs are not always fun. Cocaine and methamphetamine speed up your heart. LSD can make you feel disoriented. Alcohol intoxication impairs driving. Cigarette smoking leads to addiction and sometimes lung cancer. And people sometimes die suddenly from taking heroin. Marijuana does not often lead to physical dependence or overdose, but it does alter the way people think, behave, and react. I have tried to give you a short description of the drugs you might encounter. I chose not to try to scare you by distorting information because I want you to have confidence in what I tell you. Although I won't lie to you about their effects, there are many reasons for a person your age to not use drugs or alcohol. First, being high on marijuana or any other drug often interferes with normal life. It is difficult to retain information while high, so using it, especially daily, affects your ability to learn. Second, if you think you might try marijuana, please wait until you are older. Adults with drug problems often started using at a very early age. Finally, your father and I don't want you to get into trouble. Drug and alcohol use is illegal for you, and the consequences of being caught are huge. Here in the United States, the number of arrests for possession of marijuana has more than doubled in the past 6 years. Adults are serious about zero tolerance. If caught, you could be arrested, expelled from school, barred from playing sports, lose your driver's license, denied a college loan, and/or rejected from college. Despite my advice to abstain, you may one day choose to experiment. I will say again that this is not a good idea, but if you do, I urge you to learn as much as you can and use common sense. There are many excellent books and references, including the internet, that give you credible information about drugs. You can, of course, always talk to me. If I don't know the answers to your questions, I will try to help you find them. If you are offered drugs, be cautious. Watch how people behave, but understand that everyone responds differently, even to the same substance. If you do decide to experiment, be sure you are surrounded by people you can count upon. Plan your transportation and under no circumstances drive or get into a car with anyone else who has been using alcohol or other drugs. Call us or any of our close friends anytime, day or night, and we will pick you up, no questions asked and no consequences. And please, Johnny, use moderation. It is impossible to know what is contained in illegal drugs because they are not regulated. The majority of fatal overdoses occur because young people do not know the strength of the drugs they consume or how they combine with other drugs. Please do not participate in drinking contests which have killed far too many young people. Whereas marijuana by itself is not fatal, Too much can cause you to become disoriented and sometimes paranoid. And of course, smoking can hurt your lungs later in life and now. Johnny, as your father and I have always told you about a range of activities, including sex, think about the consequences of your actions before you act. Drugs are no different. Be skeptical, and most of all, be safe. Love, Mom. Thank you.
I'm Francois van der Linde from Switzerland. I enjoyed what you said. I think that was a very good thing. Experiences from my country show that we have passed that period of the police in the schools. People have learned that scaring young persons about the dangers of drugs does not work. But you mentioned what then? And what we are seeing at the moment is that many parents, many adults, parents or teachers, really don't know what to do. Because they know scaring has no sense. The teacher limits himself to good information. I think we agree that that is important. And you have mentioned one example how parents can talk with young people. I think the important point from your letter you read was that I felt credibility. I think the context, the whole, what was in the letter is not so important, but it was credible for me. And I think that's very important for parents, that however they talk with their kids about drugs, that they are credible. And that they talk like they talk about sex at home, that young people also see what's the drug behavior with legal drugs of their parents. Mm-hmm. And they have, but they must also have the right to show children that they do not like a certain type of behavior. I know two of my children smoke cannabis. That's not so exceptional in Switzerland. They know exactly that we don't like it. We have no quarrels about that, but they know exactly we don't like it. But I like to drink a glass of beer, and we can discuss about that. And I think the other thing is to have indicators, and that's for school, for the school situation, very important, for early detection of problems. Because teachers and school authorities do also not know what to do. A child smokes a bit of marijuana, and now what's the reaction? Mm-hmm. Nothing at all, forget it, or usually an overreaction. And to teach the teachers how to react, and the school authorities with early detection and, if necessary, an early intervention. We have made very good experiences with that approach, because also in a school building, that is an actuality when somebody smokes, and then you can also come with the messages as you rightly told us in your presentation. Would you like to comment on that?
Oh, you said a lot. Well, I think that in terms of what to do, I absolutely agree with you. I spent the last couple of years, I had the pleasure of talking to so many parent groups and PTAs all over California, actually all over the world. And where I think parents are is that they know that Just Say No doesn't work. They know the DARE program doesn't work, but what they really want is to figure out a way to get their kids through high school in one piece. And whereas they don't like the fact that their kids might experiment, they're often willing to kind of hold their breath and pray and give the message to their kids that in the end they're there to help them out. I think opening up the conversation is difficult. And remember, I'm not suggesting that parents assume the responsibility of teaching their kids about drugs one way or the other. I mean, actually, frankly, most of the kids know more about drugs than the parents do in America today. So it has to be an opening up and an exchange. I was in Vancouver a couple of weeks ago, and actually a police officer said that he had a pact with his son. I really liked this, where they made an agreement that whichever of them needed help, the other would pick them up. And guess what? The first person to ask for help was the father, not the son. But I want to also talk about what to do in the context of school, because I think that's not such a difficult issue, actually. I think schools and workplaces have to have rules about intoxicating substances. I don't think that's difficult at all. The question is what to do and how far we take zero tolerance and what the reaction should be. So I think there should be a set of rules. You don't carry drugs on campus, alcohol or other drugs. But rather than, and I think Kevin touched on this earlier, rather than expel kids, and I want to just tell you, even in my city of San Francisco, Peter, you'll forgive me, the Amsterdam of America, the reaction now in the most progressive high schools, it's less than zero tolerance, the kinds of punishments that are coming down. But I think we should be productive about the punishment, and this is what I think we ought to do. If the lesson is for the kids to understand where excessive drug use goes, why not have them do, quote, time doing community service in either needle exchange programs or drug treatment facilities? Those kinds of institutions can always use some help, whether it's filing or passing something, whatever it is. And so the offender, if you will, has to spend, 40 hours in a methadone clinic. What better lesson is there? This is where this stuff goes if you're not careful. So anyway, thank you.
My name is Alan Bean. I'm from Tulia, Texas, a town most noted for its famous drug sting, which I think most people in the room have heard of, if only because it was on the video this afternoon. But they also, in the high school, have had a random suspicionless drug testing program, and frequently will bring the drug dogs into the schools and into the parking lots. And I was wondering if you could comment briefly on how effective you think that type of program is.
Well, again, I'm borrowing from what I heard Kevin say this morning. I think that if you use drug testing to eliminate kids from extracurricular activities, you're going to be missing an opportunity to again bring them in. But what I see as most regrettable, and I don't know where drug testing is going to go. It doesn't look like it's going anywhere good right now. But just at a time, look at the federal government's websites for parents, the anti-drug, whatever it's called. And we're all saying basically the same thing with some very important differences, of course, but talk to the kids, listen, start by listening, open up conversations, establish trust. Now, I have never figured out how it is that you establish trust with your kids when you ask them what they're doing, and instead of keeping the conversation going and taking them at their word and trusting them, you then drug test them. Where does that go? Not only that, I wonder what happens to kids who are drug tested routinely in high school once they get to college. We already know about the problems of binge everything on college campuses. So here in high school, rather than also encouraging kids to make wise decisions, to learning to control their use of substances if they're going to go ahead and use, we basically, if it works, they don't use it, and then they go off to college. And that to me is a scary prospect. I'd like to see the idea of drugs as a health issue and ways to control your own use and figure out what to do to start earlier than college.
As someone who just entered college, I found a lot of what you said really interesting. And I was wondering, when you were reading your letter to your son, one of the things that I thought that it definitely gave the credibility, but one thing also that you would say that you really think he shouldn't do them, and saying no. I wonder, from research you've done, is it not proven to be kind of counterproductive to tell a teenager don't do something? Because I would think, and from what I've seen, the people I know, that if you tell a teenager to not do something, that first of all, it'll make them want to do it more, but also that in the area of talking about drugs, that if you say, I don't want you to do this, but you can still talk to me, that message it's kind of hurt as opposed to just saying, do whatever you're going to do, but talk to me. And that then they would be a lot more likely to talk to you if they are going to do it. And then that would be more productive. I wonder what you found in regards to that.
Well, I think it's a very complex issue. I think that on the one hand, maybe it's forbidden fruit, and so when you say no, they say yes. But I just had to be honest. I mean, in my opinion, it would be better if he abstained. So I had to be honest with him about that. But on the other hand, if he doesn't, I want him to know that he can either call me, or we also had a basket, we still do, in the house that always has cab fare in it. And living in San Francisco is nice because you can use that. And so it was a matter of letting them, because I also have a 24-year-old daughter, know that what I cared about most was their safety and their health.
Hold your question just a minute. We will get to answer it, sir, but ask it. We want to have, Judge Gray has an appointment at 4:20. He's going to leave. We're going to have people spend, well, that's true. I didn't mean to be funny. We're going to have the speakers who were on the program today to come up here. We'll just take just a few moments to see her. You can ask other questions. And if there are any questions for Judge Gray, particularly ask those first. And you will get to ask your question, sir. But we want to make sure that he's able to get away, and then we'll just have the other speakers that spoke today to come up to the stand.
Former president of the board of the Museum of Medical Science in Houston. Every year, many tens of thousands of students in the independent school district and other school districts about Houston are bused to the museum. Among its many exhibits, excellent exhibits on the structure and function of the human body, there's one on the adverse effects of psychoactive addicting drugs. The Children's Trust physicians still today, and I think this is an excellent way to educate children.
Yeah, thank you.
How many are we going to need?